it like a few times already.
It's recording.
There you go. Okay, everybody good? I'm going to start the webinar and start live caption. If anything, just reach out to me. And I'm going to make my host before I go. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give this a few minutes to let everybody get logged into the Zoom as we just started our webinar at 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just giving one more moment to let everybody get logged in. I see the numbers are still steadily climbing. We want to give you a moment, and we do respect your time and recognize that we're together for an hour today. All right, the numbers seem to be pausing. Let's continue. Happy Friday. And good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar for the early education contractors. This webinar is being presented by the California Department of Education, Early Education Division, and the Fiscal and Administrative Services Division. This webinar is being held on July 15, 2022, and is scheduled to run from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. And with that, I'd like to welcome Stephen Profiter, Director of the Early Education Division.
Great. Thank you very much, Alana, and happy Friday, everybody. As Alana mentioned, I'm Stephen Profiter, the Director of the Early Education Division. First and foremost, I want to welcome everybody to our first monthly EED webinar of the new year, the fiscal new year, that is. We're excited to engage with you all this afternoon. Our plan today in today's webinar is to discuss and present the early education items in the final budget. There are a lot of exciting investments and policy changes that were enacted this year. We're anxious to get started and let you know all of the changes, but I'd like to acknowledge that with so much in the budget for early education, we don't have every single answer just yet. There may be some instances today where our Q&A team have to respond that we're working on answers to your questions, but I encourage you to keep asking all of your questions. These questions will help ensure our guidance is more responsive. So it's a great help to us to get all of these questions. Our team is working diligently to develop guidance to send out to you all. And like I said, your questions just help us provide that more effective and more encompassing guidance. I'd like to express my appreciation for all of you, as well as for the team that you see on these webinars and the team members you may not see. The CDE will continue to host our monthly webinars as we move further into the year so that we make sure that we're keeping you all updated. And we'll share out upcoming webinar dates through emails out through our distribution list. And I want to take just a moment to extend just our appreciation to you all for your grace and feedback as we've continued to collaborate so well during these webinars. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to invite invite Virginia to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be with you all today. There's a lot to celebrate here as we look at everything that we've done as a field in the past year, and then looking forward. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Virginia Early. I'm administrator of our policy office. We work on with the governor and the legislature on the budget, and then work on implementing it through guidance once it passed. So lots from my office today, and I will pass it over to Alana, who is our moderator.
Greetings once again. I am Alana Pinsler, and I'm a child development consultant in the Early Education System Improvement Office here at EED, and I'll be your moderator today. To help answer questions and making this webinar run smoothly, we have a great team with us today. From the policy office, we have Patricia Gonzalez, Jennifer Osalvo, Amira Amala, and Danielle Davis. From the UPK Implementation and Support Office, we have Shanna Burkholz Vasquez and Stacy Aganozistopoulos. From the Program Quality Implementation Office, we have Amy Silva, Cassandra Lewis, Kara Lancaster, and Nadia Kersey. From the Early Education, Nutrition, and Fiscal Services, or EENFS, we have Lucy Moscata, Corey Kahn, and Alan Lynch. And from the Administration and Fiscal Services AFS office, we have Nikki Ninia. From the Applied Data Research and Evaluation, or ADRE, we have Carlina Dahara. And from the Director's Office, we have Angela Data, Brianne Rude, and Sarah Dawson. We also want to warmly mention our Technology Services Division, who ensure that the Zoom link is live and working, and also to ensure that we have closed captioning available for you to utilize during this webinar. To turn it on, you can click on the CC button on the bottom right of your screen. As always, our team is committed to being as responsive as possible, and we will not be able to answer every question. And as Steve mentioned earlier, questions that you ask here are used to inform policy later on and used to inform management bulletins and our FAQs on our web pages. Also, the chat box is disabled. We will be able to share links with you there, as Sarah Dawson did earlier. If you would like to chat with us, please utilize the question and answer feature. Next slide. And to begin our packed agenda, we will begin with the Policy Office providing an overview of the final budget that includes explanations of provisions of Universal Transitional Kindergarten, planning and implementation supports for Universal Pre-K, changes to the California State Preschool Program, funding for infrastructure, expanded learning opportunity program, the Inclusive Early Education or Expansion Program, or EAP, and other key proposals from the budget. Then EENFS will then provide some information on contract allocations as a result of the final budget. And then there will be an update on the CSUP regulations. We will finish our agenda with some UPK general updates. As always, we're going to respond to questions in real time throughout this webinar via that Q&A function. We're also going to answer some questions live at the end. And as we do with every webinar, we will take those unanswered questions and work on answers to post on FAQs on our website. Back to Virginia to begin our agenda. Thanks, Virginia.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So lots to talk about in the budget, and lots to be happy about in the budget. So Amira will be putting some links in the chat to various budget-related legislation, as well as a final budget summary. So we'll have that there for you as resources. As we go on to the next slide, diving into some of the specifics, starting with Universal Transitional Kindergarten. So the final budget makes a multi-billion-dollar investment in early childhood education across both TK and early childhood education through whether that's state preschool and our other early learning and care programs throughout the state. We're really excited about this investment and the next step in last year's historic agreement to expand transitional kindergarten. So first, the budget is providing $614 million for the first year of transitional kindergarten or TK expansion. So there's that. And this is for all children turning 5 years old between September 2nd and February 2nd. So really note that February 2nd date. You may be remembering, oh, TK eligibility is September 2nd through through December 2nd, but it's actually now through February 2nd. So good to remember that. As a reminder, TK is not mandatory for 4-year-olds. Families can choose whether to send their 4-year-old child to TK, CSTP, Head Start, a private provider, etc. But as a universal program, any 4-year-old child that wants to access TK with a birthday in this age range this year shall be admitted. Second, the budget includes $383 million for an additional adult in TK classrooms to reduce ratios to 1 to 12. And it also includes fiscal penalties for schools if they do not meet class size, ratio, or teacher requirements in TK. So Sarah Dawson, you'll see that she put a link in the chat to Education Code section 48,000.1. And that is where you can get a clear idea of what some of those penalties might look like. So that's why she put that that link there if you're interested in learning more. Happy to answer more questions if you all have them. The budget also makes it easier to staff TK classrooms by doing a couple of things. So it allows the Commission on Teacher Credentialing to issue a 1-year emergency specialist teaching permit in early childhood education that authorizes the permit holder to teach TK. And then also the budget clarifies that substitute TK teachers are not required to meet the additional TK teacher requirements around child development units. Then finally, there's a piece that requires TK data to be collected separately from kindergarten data, because statutorily TK is the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program. Those data pieces have been collected jointly in the past, so this is a change to allow the state to better understand the unique experience that children enrolled in TK are having. As we move into the next slide, really gets at, you know, this investment that we're making in UPK as a whole is very historic. It's exciting, and it's also part of a bigger picture in this year's budget around transforming schools. So this is a graphic we like to use at CDE to remind ourselves how truly historic some of these investments are, whether it's through universal preschool, community schools, professional development, anti-racism training, mental health programs, expanded learning programs, and universal meals. We'll talk through some of these more later in this webinar, but really want to stop for a minute and say, wow, we are truly, truly transforming schools to support the children we serve. So with that, and I love all the applause and the hearts and the party hats and the clapping coming through, because that's truly how we feel. That's why we're all in this work, because we are so excited about this vision. So we know that many of you have concerns if you're a state preschool contractor or other preschool provider that's not a school district. Many of you have shared concerns with us about the impact of UTK on your contracts and programs. Many of you that are school districts have said, wow, this is a lot. How do we do this? And so we're really happy to share with you that there are resources in the budget to think through all these questions. The budget appropriates a total of $318 million for UPK planning and implementation supports, and that's in addition to the $200 million that was proposed last year. I should say enacted last year, because those checks are, have gone out. So this is a total, when you compare this, when you add this year and last year, that's a total of $518.3 million available for UPK planning and implementation. Of the new $318 million in this year's budget are broken out between 2 different grant programs, and the 2 different grant programs have very similar names. So it's very easy to get them mixed up. So if we're talking about UPK planning and implementation, that's one. If we're talking about the California Universal Preschool Planning Grant, that's the other. So it's the difference between using the UPK and using the word preschool. So the $300 million UPK planning and implementation, that one is for districts that have kindergarten enrollment and therefore are expected to have TK enrollment. It's also their funds for county offices of education for county level efforts. This is very similar in terms of methodology, in terms of funding purposes, to the $200 million for UPK planning and implementation grants that went out last year. There are a couple of rules that have changed. So for this new fund, One of them is that funds can be used of this $300 million for classroom operating costs. That wasn't a previous allowable expense. And there are other requirements for this funds that LEAs have to commit to planning with their county's local planning council and CSPP and Head Start providers in their region. The $18.3 million per year for 3 years is for the California Universal Preschool Planning Grant Program. And that's really with a focus on supporting the preschool planning across the mixed delivery system. So, so the UPK, the $300 million one is focused on pre-K, AKA the year before kindergarten, AKA 4-year-olds. The California Universal Preschool Planning Grant Program is focused on planning for 3 and 4-year-old children, not just 4-year-olds, through a mixed delivery system that ensures access to high quality, full and part-day learning experiences, coordinated services, and referrals for families to access health and social emotional support services. The funds would go to local planning councils or resource and referral agencies if the local planning councils are not interested in applying for those funds. And grantees are required to develop a plan for consideration by their County Office of Education Governing Board by June 30th of next year, June 30th, 2023. And that plan is supposed to focus on how 3 and 4-year-old children, how all 4-year-olds and an increased number of at promise, we're trying to use that word instead of at risk, 3-year-old children can access full day programs before kindergarten. So lots there. I'm sure you're going to hear way more from us. There's that new program has a focus on planning around inclusion, assisting the workforce, providing outreach and enrollment support for families, coordinating planning activities between these 2 grants, and also partnering with tribes. So we're so appreciative of this identification of these resources to support everything happening around UPK. As we move into the next slide, diving a little bit deeper into how what the changes are in the budget for state preschool, you can see that the budget increases adjustment factors significantly. So the chart on this slide shows adjustment factors, and we put the old adjustment factor next to the new one so that you could really see for state preschool how it's going to change. So, and you can see the adjustment factor categories as well as the old factors and the new factors. So children with exceptional needs adjustment factor, that was 1.54 last year, effective July 1st, that's going up to 2.4. Children with severe disabilities adjustment factor is moving from 1.93 to 2.4. Children 47 months or younger, so basically 3-year-old children, previously didn't have an adjustment factor. Now we'll have an adjustment factor of 1.8. Children who are dual language learners, that adjustment factor is moving from 1.1 to 1.2. And then the early childhood mental health consultation adjustment factor is moving from 1.05 to 1.1. So really a lot here to support contractors, especially as they pivot to serving more 3-year-olds with a higher rate for those 3-year-olds. There's also a 6.56% cost of living adjustment in the budget. A couple things about that. First of all, it's the largest COLA in the history of the local control funding formula. So we know that folks really want information on how this COLA will be applied. However, unfortunately, we do not have clarity at this time from the way education code is written to tell you for sure exactly how this will be applied. And if you want to look at the education code section, it's education code section 8242. So you can look at it yourself. What it basically says is that rates are set at the greater of the 75th percentile of the 2018 RMR, or the contract per child reimbursement amount as of December 31st, 2021. But the language doesn't specify where exactly the COLA is applied. And so we'll be working with the legislature and the administration to clarify intent about where that COLA is applied, because obviously it's a significant COLA and we know our programs can really benefit from increased rates. There's also $21.3 million to waive family fees, and also the extension of the hold harmless for 22-23. That's very similar to last year's. We do want to just quickly flag that if you're on our division mailing list, we sent out an email yesterday with some initial guidance on the hold harmless and family fee waivers. We'll be issuing a hold harmless and a family fee management bulletin, but for now you can rely on that guidance. And if you didn't get it or you have questions, you can reach out to your program quality implementation consultant. And then finally, there are changes to the audit threshold for yearly audits in state preschool. The threshold is moved from 25,000 to 100,000. Moving on to the next slide, I'll pass it over to Corey for some information on Budget Act allocation.
Thanks, Virginia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Corey Kahn, and I am the manager in the Early Education and Nutrition Fiscal Services Unit, also known as EENFS. So the department received allocations for a number of the fiscal year 22-23 Budget Act. Changes affecting the California State Preschool Program that Virginia just went over. Specifically, the fiscal year 22-23 provided funding to support the new adjustment factors for 3-year-old children, dual language learners, and exceptional needs / severely disabled adjustment factor increases, and then family fee waivers and COLA. So allocations to support adjustment factor increases and family fee waivers will be based on June 2022 data that was submitted by our contractors as of August 20th, 2022. So I have seen some questions in the chat about what the how we will be allocating. So it will be based on, at least for the adjustment factor increases and family fee waivers, it will be based on the data that has been submitted based on your June report. So if a June report is not received by August 20th, allocations will be based on the most recently submitted report. So whatever the last report is that we have from you, the contractor. Next slide, please. Okay, so all Budget Act allocations will be processed through a contract amendment via the allocation letter process. So that is something similar that we implemented in fiscal year 21-22. So as a reminder, the allocation letter does not require a signature and will look similar to a contract amendment. And so specifically, the allocation letter will still include the contract phase sheet, and any changes in funding will be identified where applicable. So I'm going to turn it back over to Virginia to continue discussing some other changes in the budget.
Thanks so much, Corey. So we know there's a lot here. So one of the big changes to the California State Preschool Program, or CSPP eligibility, are changes around eligibility and certification. So first of all, there's a big change to increase the eligibility threshold in the California State Preschool Program to 100% of state median income, up from 85%. There's also a change to allow children with exceptional needs to be categorically eligible for state preschool. So this means that they can be served without having to, it's a category of eligibility, just like income eligibility is. This only applies to children with exceptional needs. So if a child has exceptional needs and has siblings that do not have exceptional needs, the sibling would not be able to qualify for CSPP under the exceptional needs categorical eligibility. It only applies to the child with exceptional needs. So the sibling would have to qualify under another category if they were to be enrolled as well. There's also a change to allow children whose income is no more than 15% above the income eligibility threshold to be served in full-day state preschool as well. Previously, this was limited to part-day state preschool. There's also a modification of the definition of countable income for the purpose of determining eligibility, and that's to exclude some foster care payments and guaranteed income payments. Those are specifically defined in the statute, so please look carefully at the email that we sent yesterday. Again, if you didn't get the email, reach out to your PQI consultant. I'm sure they would be happy to forward it to you. There's specific links in that email to which sections of WIC payments are applied. So rather than taking the summary, please refer to those sections of statute. And we have linked to those sections of statute for you, and also showed you where you can find this in statute for yourself. We'll be working on an eligibility management bulletin that will deal with eligibility and priority, but we really want you to have those resources to look now, which is why we sent that email. So one other change, by the way, that I skipped by accident is that there's also a change in the order in which children with disabilities or children with exceptional needs are prioritized for enrollment. So more to come on that as well. Finally, there's a change to allow all children participating in state preschool to maintain continuous eligibility for 24 months. So that email yesterday also had some initial guidance on the 24-month eligibility, and we'll be working on a follow-up management bulletin. So as we look to how we support as a state our children with disabilities, the budget provides a lot of support for children with a lot of additional support for children with disabilities. So we mentioned a couple of the things around categorical eligibility and increased adjustment factor. So in addition to those, the budget includes a requirement for state preschool contractors to reserve 5% of funded enrollment for children with disabilities in 22-23. That will move to 7.5% by next year and 10% the year after. So 7.5% in 23-24, 10% in 24-25. Contractors will be fully funded for that enrollment regardless of attendance. And the idea is that if you have a child with disabilities that needs to enroll halfway through the year, when they get an IEP, for example, you can immediately, you have the flexibility to sort of save spots if you need to. There are requirements in the statute for CDE to review data and provide technical assistance to support increasing inclusion. And there will be no penalties from this until 26-27. And there'll be at that point, CDE will be, there will be potential penalties, and there'll also be a waiver process for folks that we'll be defining. In addition to support contractors to get to more inclusive settings, there's $250 million to increase to add for new grants for the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Program, or EAP. So of that $250 million, $200 million is for sort of direct, at the local level programs. There's $50 million set aside for state level systems building and supports around inclusion. And then finally, the budget has $2 million for CDE to develop a process and tools to identify children at risk for developmental delays and learning disabilities. So definitely knowing that we all want to increase inclusion, it's very nice to see so many supports for that across the increased adjustment factor and these provisions, with those provisions phased in gradually over time. So going on to our next slide, we know that as we look at things like UPK, as we look at CSPP expansion, as we look at all the different things that we have going on, that facilities are a top thing that people bring up. And so we wanted to share with you what is in the budget for infrastructure. So there's nearly $6 billion for pre-K through 12 education facilities, and that includes $1.4 billion in general fund for TK through 12 school facilities construction, $4.2 billion for the school facility program, and then $100 million for the California Preschool, TK, and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant this year. And that is open to CSPP contractors and TK and kindergarten. And there's an intention written in that statute that there would be another $550 million intended for the year after that. And I think we may have a typo on our slide. So the $100 million is for this year, and the $550 million is for next year. I apologize for that typo. There's also a change to allow community colleges to receive that funding. There's some money. There's $30 million per year for 2 years to support eligible facilities costs for the charter school facility grant program. So things to be aware of if you're a charter school that has CSPP or TK. Finally, for those that are community-based organizations that are not LEAs, there's $100 million to develop and repair existing childcare and preschool infrastructure at those non-local education agencies, especially in low-income communities. So DSS talked a little bit about this on their webinar yesterday. This is the program they're administering, but we wanted to make sure that all of our state preschool contractors that are at community-based organizations were aware of that resource. And then we'll just tie up the budget with our final budget slide, which is some of our other key investments. We can go to the next slide. So beyond specific investments targeted at state preschool or at TK, there's $85 million to expand and augment the work of the Early Math Initiative, and then to coordinate that initiative with other efforts that are happening around math and science. There's a total of $4 billion for the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program, so full implementation to take place by 25-26, and a rate increase for other expanded learning programs. This is really going back to the theme of transforming schools. There's $1.1 billion to expand access to the community schools grant to every eligible LEA that opts to apply on behalf of its high needs schools. And there's significant funding for educator workforce pathways and professional learning. So there's a lot in the budget. CDs is unpacking it, working on guidance, working on resources, working on more information, working on management bulletins, and other different things that were to get this more information out to you. So we may not have every question and every answer that you may want to ask on the budget this year, this webinar, but anything we can't answer today, we'll take back. One other thing that I realized I skipped by accident that I want to just touch on before I pass it off to the next presenter is that there are some questions that we've been getting about whether a proposal that was considered that would allow children as young as 2 years old to enroll in state preschool has moved forward in the budget. And so we wanted to clarify that that did not end up in the budget. So if you're wondering about that, just know that age eligibility in state preschool at this time has remained the same, even though there's some of those other eligibility changes. And with that, I will pass it off to Danielle to go over some pieces on our state preschool regulations.
Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. So it's very exciting. The CDE has finally gotten the state preschool program regulations approved, which is very exciting. They went into effect on July 1, 2022. It's important for CSPP contractors to know that they should use Title V, Chapter 18.5 when referencing regulations from this point forward. For those of you that didn't know what was going on, a little explanation. EED decided to move all the applicable state preschool regulations into one chapter. So they're no longer intertwined with the regulations in Title V that are currently applicable for childcare programs to make it easier for our contractors to understand what exactly applies to them. And so this means that the regulations in Title V, Chapter 19, which we have all been using for a very long time, are no longer applicable to CSPP. So that's an important note to just remember from this point forward. we'll be using chapter 18.5, and chapter 19 will still be reserved for childcare programs. And then a copy of the final regulations was sent out in a PDF form through our email distribution list. And it can also be found on the CDE's rulemaking webpage. Just be sure that you find the link that's titled Final Regulations to make sure that you're getting the right copy of them, because it has all the iterations and the edits that we went through. So you'll want to make sure to find the one that says Final Regulations, and then that will automatically download the regulations in a Word doc for you guys. And then I'm going to put the link to the webpage and a direct link to the final regulations in the chat. But before I do that, I just want to let you point out one thing. If you have any questions about these regulations, you're more than welcome to reach out, but please review the regulations before you submit questions. I feel like some of the questions that you may have will be answered in the regulations. However, if you do find that after you've read through the regulations, you have some questions, feel free to reach out to either your assigned PQI regional consultant, or you can send an email to our Title V inbox, which is eedtitle5@cde.ca.gov. And just include your agency name and county so we can make sure we provide accurate technical assistance to you for your questions. And right now I'm going to put in the link to the regulations and the link to the email so that you have all of that information. Oh, thanks, Sarah. I saw her. She put the email in. Perfect. And then I am going to hand it back over to Shanna to give us some UPK updates.
Thanks, Danielle. All right, so I wanted to share some exciting updates with you all around the Universal Pre-Kindergarten. The first is that UPK office hours will resume on Wednesday, August 3rd. So to subscribe to the CDE's P3/UPK listserv, we'll put that link in the chat, and you just send a message with the word subscribe. I also wanted to let you know that we had sent out a UPK summer survey to get feedback around webinar and office hour topics, and that survey will close today. So we will put a link in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to fill out that survey, please do so today so we can get your feedback on what topics you would like to see in our future webinars and office hours. And then the final update that I have for you today is that the UPK Planning and Implementation Grant program surveys will be sent out at the end of July, and they must be submitted by August 31st. So the surveys will include the UPK planning templates, required questions, and they will go out to LEAs and county offices of education. We will be posting those surveys on the elementary webpage, which we will put in the chat, and we will also send those out in other ways just to make sure everyone gets them. And I guess I have one more, and that is that the last two apportionments from for the UPK Planning and Implementation and Countywide Planning and Capacity Building grants are scheduled to be released in early August. So that's very exciting. And I will pass this back to Alana.
Thank you, Shanna. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for. The question and answer has been quite full, and there's been a lot of responses already made. So let's see what's still open, and if I can call upon the appropriate CDE team member to answer it. So for the first one, there has been some questions in here about regulations from CDSS versus CDE. And so I'd like to call upon either Steve or Virginia to sort of just broadly speak to what is now being proposed in the budget and how our two agencies are, still working together for the care of children.
Yeah, I could take this. Thank you, Alana. So yeah, we've seen a number of questions around differences in budget investments or budget policies between the California State Preschool Program and programs that are administered by the California Department of Social Services. I think one thing we'd say is that the California State Preschool Program is a primary component of California's Universal Pre-Kindergarten Plan. California is providing universal pre-K for all 4-year-old children and expanded access for 3-year-old children. There are some differences between programs administered by CDE and CDSS, notably. And those of you who may have been part of like webinars or other kind of input sessions we've done in the past when CDE was the lead agency for the Child Care and Development Block Grant, is there are some federal limitations about what can be achieved between different funding sources. There's different things that the federal regulations allow versus what say isn't maybe in place for strictly state funded programs. And so the California State Preschool Program is funded by the California's General Fund. It's part of the Proposition 98 guarantee, and there's also some general fund money in there. Whereas the CCTR or say other programs, many of which are administered by CDSS, have a mix of federal funds and have some restrictions. I know that, I think we understand that these differences are also on CDSS's radar. And as we roll out guidance, as we've done with all of our guidance, the California Department of Social Services is a key partner in reviewing guidance, and there are certainly some things around eligibility as we think about how families, contractors have to navigate differences between 12-month eligibility and 24-month eligibility, to use an example, because we know children will transition between, say, CCTR to CSPP, back to CCTR possibly for school age. That those are things that we will work through together as we do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, let's see what's coming up next. I'd like to call on Danielle to answer a question about 24-month eligibility. Does 24-month eligibility apply to families enrolled as seeking employment or vocational training, etc.?
Thanks, Alana. Yeah, I saw a few questions coming in through the Q&A about this, and it does. It applies to everyone in state preschool. No matter how you enrolled, no matter what eligibility criteria you have, everyone in state preschool is guaranteed 24-month eligibility. So just to make sure that's clear, there is no provisions that exclude certain sections of families just because they were enrolled for different eligibility reasons.
All right, you got a lot of emojis for that one, Danielle. Okay, the next question I'd like to call on Virginia. There was a lot and a lot more coming in. Okay, that's the first time we've had emojis on. So Virginia, there was a lot of questions about exceptional need. 1, the definition, and 2, about documenting. Can you please come back and give us some more clarity around that?
Sure. So happy to answer it. So I always love to send people back to the statute because I think it's always helpful to see and read for yourself. So I'm going to copy and paste into the chat what the definition means, and I'll also copy and paste the link to where you can find it, because I think it's always want to be looking back to, oh, why is this not copying? Always want to be looking back to statute. Okay, that's not working. I'm so sorry. For some reason, I'm not able to copy. So that's the link that I just put in. It's in Education Code Section 8205H. For some reason, it's not letting me copy and paste. But essentially says that children with exceptional needs in 8205H means either of the following. Number 1, children under 3 years old who have been determined to be eligible for early intervention services pursuant to the Early Intervention Services Act and its implemented regulations. And that includes basically children with IFSPs. So you can read the whole section, that whole piece itself. And then for children that are older than 3, that's really children that have been determined to be eligible for special education related services by an IEP team. So they have an active IEP, and they're receiving the services on that IEP. So we also want to note that this definition of children with exceptional needs has been amended. It used to be there was some language that said something like they had extra support or extra help or something, and that language has been taken out. So children with exceptional needs includes people, sort of a slightly broader group of children based on the IFSP or based on the IEP than it did previously. Not limited to people that require extra support in the classroom as a result of their IEP or IFSP. We're working on a management bulletin that will get at more around everything that's in the budget around children with IEPs and IFSPs. We know that there are lots of questions here, including about the documentation requirements. So more to come from us on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Virginia, for that clarity. I would now like to call on Corey Kahn. There were some questions in the chat about adjustment factors, specifically the two that were popping up was about a child that has multiple adjustment factors and which one to use, or if you add them together. And then secondarily, there was also about an effective contract amendments that would include funding for adjustment factors.
Yeah, so the first question I can address, I think I have addressed them in the Q&A, but verbally to everyone on this call. When a child meets multiple adjustment factor categories, you as a contractor can choose which one you will report them under. So you are not going to report them under 2 adjustment factor categories. So one of the examples are, I have a 3-year-old who is also a dual language learner. And so now in 22-23, there is a 1.8 adjustment for serving a 3-year-old, and then the dual language learner will be 1.2. You will not report them in the 2 categories. You will only pick one of them, and most agencies will pick the one that is most advantageous to their earnings. So that is allowable. And then the second question was about the allocations, right? So as one of the slides that I presented on, we will base our allocations on June data for some of the adjustment factor increases and the family fee waivers. So for example, we will be using June cumulative data to determine how to allocate funding we receive for the 3-year-old adjustment factor. So that's just one example. Dual language learners is another one, exceptional needs. So that will all be handled after the August 20th revision period. And then one last thing that I know, Alana, you didn't ask me, but I do want to bring up, because I did address it in the chat as well. Someone had asked, when are these adjustment factors going to be included on our report forms submitted in CPARIS? So we are working on those updates. And so we are hoping to have them available to contractors live in CPARIS by August, sometime in August, and we're shooting for before August 20th, because that's when July reports are due if you are a monthly reporter or choose to submit a July report.
Thank you very much, Corey. There definitely was a lot of questions that were really nuanced around the adjustment factors, and glad that we were both taking notes and that your notes were a little bit more thorough than mine. Okay, so secondarily, there was a question about, and I'd like to call Danielle back really quickly, about the CSUP regulations, and it seemed just wanting to clear up where the CSUP regulations are and what they should look like in terms of just for knowledge for the contractor.
Sure. If you are looking on our website and you click on one of the regulations links on the CDE rulemaking webpage and you find a version with strikeouts, that is not the final version. So the final version should have no strikeouts. It should be completely clean. It should just have what is current regulation. I can also put in here the Thomson Reuters Westlaw page that actually is the people that publish the California Code of Regulations. And so their website is up to date every Friday they update it. So those regulations are also on there. If you have any questions about or something on the CDE website seems a little off to you, you can always go there and double check to see what is actual current regulation. That way you can double check that you were looking at the correct document on CDE's website. And unfortunately, we can't just take down all the other versions and just leave the final regulation version up there, which would be super helpful for everyone, I'm sure. But there is a law that requires us to keep it public for up to a year after the regulations have been published, so people can go back and see any changes that were proposed, etc.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danielle. I'd like to invite Virginia back. There is a question, and perhaps Corey, you can also talk about it too, about additional pay. But before I do that, I do see some questioning in the chat about, hey, I can't see the questions on the question and answer. Now, from the CDE Zoom side, we did put on that you can see them once they've been answered. A lot of times when folks are going, because Zoom, loves to update every once in a while, probably once a week now. Sometimes if you're on multiple screens, you might just have to kind of sort of readjust for viewing those questions and answers. And once again, any question that is answered or any question that is unanswered will be used for informing management bulletins and our frequently asked questions as well. Okay, so the question I'd like for Virginia and either Corey is about, is there going to be any money to pay for additional staff for the inclusion of those exceptional needs students? And if so, how do you go about receiving it?
So I can start, but Corey, maybe you can take it after I'm done. So definitely understandanding that there's a lot here around serving more children with IEPs and IFSPs, that those children that statutorily defined as children with exceptional needs. And that's where those adjustment factors that we showed on the slide really come into play. So seeing that the adjustment factors have gone up pretty significantly, and this benefits you whether you're serving 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, because in either case, the adjustment factor for children with exceptional needs is higher than the adjustment factor for 3-year-olds. So it's going from 1.54 to 2.4. So that means that you're getting 2.4 times the rate that you would get for a children without exceptional needs. Whereas historically, you only got 50% more or 54% more. Children with severe disabilities used to get almost twice, 1.93 times the rate, whereas now you're getting 2.4 times the rate. So that's really where the sort of costs for serving more children with disabilities are factored in, and there are resources allocated to support that. There are also, as I mentioned, the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Grant Program that's available for LEAs to apply for, but LEAs can also apply on behalf of community-based organizations. So there's that, and that can support with things like infrastructure you might need, professional learning that you might need to support your inclusion. But Corey can add more about how you go about getting the adjustment factor.
Yeah, so that was really good, Virginia, the way you explained it. So essentially what I'm gonna break it down a little bit too. So with the adjustment factors changing and increasing, you essentially are, if you have children in those adjustment factor categories, by reporting them in those categories, you are getting that multiplier to your rate. So for example, exceptional needs, like Virginia said, was 2.4 times your current rate. So that's kind of how you get the additional reimbursement. So again, we know that as adjustment factors increase, that without additional funding, that would be reducing the services that you provide. So there in the budget, there were funding allocated for many of these adjustment factor increases. So that's what we will be working on over the next month or so to get that out to you. And so essentially how you get it is through reporting them within those categories.
Great, thank you again. It's always great to see multiple divisions and offices working together to ensure that you have the most up-to-date and thorough response. Let's see, the next question, I'm going to call on Danielle again. The question is about 24-month eligibility, and it is, do I extend eligibility for all of the current enrolled families for 24 months?
Okay, perfect. So this is a little caveated question. So I want to make sure I'm clear between part day and full day. So for part day, because children begin services after July 1st, all of the families in part day, state preschool, should be extended for the rest of this program year and the following program year, as long as they are still age eligible. For full day, however, only those families at this point that were enrolled or recertified on or after July 1st of 2022 should be extended to 24 months at this point. We're working on a management bulletin that will address this a little further and provide more details, but we sent out an email yesterday with this information in it. So if you have any questions, you can refer to that email. You could also reach out to your PQI consultant, and we can help sort of guide you guys through this while we're still waiting for a management bulletin to be fully written and posted. And once the management bulletin is posted, we definitely will let you guys know. So don't worry on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The time flies when you are having fun. It's the question we're going to go, but it's also when as we're here together and learning as we're working through this brand new budget. So I'm going to call upon our director, Stephen, to sign us out for the day because the hour is upon us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, team. Thank you, everybody who, tuned in, asked questions. I think our current count is we're up over 255, an incredible amount of questions. And so we know there's a lot of questions about some of the policies that are in the budget. And rest assured, we're working as quickly as we can to get management bulletins out to provide you all with guidance. There's an awful lot on exceptional needs. And inclusion of children with disabilities and things like that. It's not unexpected given all of the different investments and policy changes in this year's budget. We will be again, so we're working on management bulletins. We have lots of questions. We are going to be taking these questions, going through them carefully to ensure that we're addressing to the greatest extent possible these questions in our guidance. And yeah, just want to appreciate everybody's engagement here. Certainly, again, hear the different folks asking questions about CSPP and CCTR differences. I noted same things earlier in what I shared on the webinar. I'd also note that the law is written by the legislature and the governor, and so as state agencies we implement the law, and so just noting that, but we will do our absolute best as we did during the transition to support state preschool programs and all of our partners. So hope you have a wonderful Friday, wonderful start to a weekend. It's supposed to be pretty hot up north, so hoping that you all have a cool place and you all are giving yourselves some grace as you're working through this. There's an awful lot going on, so just thank you all.